April 26, 1986, at 1:23 a.m. and 40 seconds. A planned safety test has gone awry due to design flaw and human error, and the fourth unit of the Chernobyl power plant explodes and burns, sending toxic flames into the atmosphere and exposing residents and power plant workers alike to dangerous levels of radioactive activity. Hello and welcome to the Sally Jesse Raphael Show. I'm Sally Jesse Raphael, and I have a very special show for you today. It's been almost 40 years since the accident at Chernobyl, and we have here tonight on stage at the Sally Jesse Raphael Show some of the victims of the Chernobyl disaster. The accident destroyed the Chernobyl core reactor, killing 30 power plant workers and firemen within 3 months, and several further deaths were reported afterwards. Acute radiation syndrome was confirmed in 134 cases. Of these, 28 people died of acute radiation syndrome within a few weeks. ARS, or acute radiation syndrome, is an early effect of exposure to high levels of ionizing radiation. We have the wife of one of these early onset victims here tonight on our show. Another victim we have on the show tonight suffers from the late effects of exposure to high levels of radiation. These effects include leukemia and thyroid cancer. You see, folks, this is the extent of the disaster. It didn't just touch those on the power plant grounds, and the devastation didn't happen just all at once. According to the United Nations Scientific Committee, up to 6,000 youths in the surrounding area of the power plant contracted thyroid cancer simply from drinking milk from the cows that were grazing on the grass in the Chernobyl area. Before we bring the victims out, I'd like to give you a clear picture of what I'm speaking to when I say the Chernobyl disaster area. I had the Sally Jesse Raphael cartographers construct this wonderful map right here of the area to give you a clearer picture. So as you can see, Chernobyl is right here. It's very near Russia and the Belarus border. And when I speak of the area that was affected, I'm talking about the 150,000 miles around Chernobyl. This includes what is today part of Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus, but if you remember, in 1986, the Ukraine was a part of the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union wanted to keep this accident under wraps. The high levels of radiation in the atmosphere noticed by Western Europe, workers at a nuclear power plant in Sweden noticed that their reactors were going off to unusual levels of radiation in the atmosphere. The source of this radiation was soon revealed to be Chernobyl, and the USSR could no longer keep the accident a secret. It was at this point, 2 days later, on April 28th of 1986, that the residents of the area were finally evacuated. Victims of the Chernobyl disaster include power plant workers and fire persons and cleanup crews that were called in to clean up the wreckage. Also, residents of the Chernobyl area. Let me introduce my first guest. Welcome back from the commercial break. I have with me here Anatoly Smirnov. Anatoly was one of the liquidators that came in to clean up some of the wreckage from the Chernobyl nuclear power accident. Anatoly, would you like to tell me about some of your experiences?
Yes, Sally, thank you so much. So I was the liquidator at the Chernobyl power plant after the explosion. The liquidators worked from 1986 to 1989 in the 30-kilometer exclusion zone. We helped to decontaminate roads and buildings. We were aiding in building the sarcophagus. We also helped people evacuate the area, as well as pick up graphite and clear off the roof of the reactor ultimately. Because of our close proximity to the radiation, many of us got stochastic effects of radiation, which is dependent on the amount of radiation. And the more radiation we get, the probability of getting other side effects goes up. The side effects that we did end up getting were cataracts, CLL, which is chronic lymphocytic leukemia, and thyroid cancer, as well as aging a bit faster than normal. Specifically, the chronic lymphocytic leukemia is hitting the liquidator population around age 52, but realistically, the median age to get that is 72. I can't work anymore. I'm like indebted to the government, and I've lost a lot of friends along the way.
Thank you, Anatoly. I know that was difficult for you, but thank you for being so candid and thorough about your experiences. Now, can I ask, Anatoly, why are you still dressed this way?
Yes, Sally, I would love to address that. Thank you. I'm dressed this way to show what we had to wear during the cleanup, and so I'm wearing these gloves in order to protect our hands from radiation. I'm wearing glasses because I got cataracts as one of the effects from being exposed to the radiation, but also as a protective measure. I'm also wearing our protective suit that was supposed to protect us from the radiation and from getting radioactive dust and debris on our skin. And I just wanted to show you what was actually given to us as protection, even though it wasn't sufficient, and we still don't know how much we were exposed to because we weren't given dosimetry badges.
Fascinating. Thank you for being on the show tonight, Anatoly.
Thank you, Sally.
Welcome back. I have here with me Katya Plavik, widow of Vladimir Plavik, a firefighter who died in this horrible accident. Katya, can you tell me what it was like to get that phone call early in the morning of April 26th?
Yes, certainly I can. My husband was actually the lieutenant that was being dispatched on that early morning, around 1:30 a.m. And we thought he was just attending a typical fire, but it happened to be a nuclear power plant disaster that forever changed my life and my husband's life. Well, my deceased. I remember receiving a phone call that he was hospitalized, and I was able to go visit him in the hospital. And I remember looking at him and I didn't recognize him. The doctors described to me it was known as acute radiation syndrome, and he suffered from radiation burns, severe GI symptoms, blood disorders, no amount of morphine and blood transfusions could bring him back.
So you're saying there was no medical solution that could help your husband?
No, he was too far gone. There was no point of return. But I kept hoping that he would pull through this. I just assumed it was a fire, just burns from the fire.
So, can you tell me exactly how your husband died then?
He died due to a large amount of radiation exposure. It was a deterministic effect. Most of the people that were involved in the Chernobyl accident suffered symptoms later in life, like cancer, cataracts. But unfortunately, my husband died from exposure to radiation too close. He was in charge of putting out the fire directly in the core, and that much radiation just, as you would say, zapped him.
Well, thank you very much, Katya, for being on the show and for being open and honest about your experiences. I know that this was rough for you, and thank you, Katya. As you heard from the victims on the show
Excuse me,
tonight,
Sally. What about the animals that were exposed to all that radiation?
moving on. As you heard from the victims on the show tonight, nuclear accidents aren't something easily fixed or cleaned up, and the devastation is ongoing in the lives of these victims. The zone immediately around Chernobyl is still uninhabitable and is known as the exclusion zone. If this show sparked any interest for you, you can take a trip to sunny Ukraine and see the Chernobyl exclusion zone and take a tour of one of the most radioactively contaminated regions on the planet.